lovely friends. Welcome back to Procrastinate with Books. I know this year has been running off rapidly, and at least from the reading perspective, I've managed to tag along with it. Looking at my Goodreads challenge, it actually reminds me how very different each reading year can be. As you can see, I have read different amount of books in different years, and specifically if I talk about this June-July month period, last year I read just 4 books in the span of 1.5 months. And look at me this year, I almost read 20 books in the month of June, and I'm still going pretty strong for July as well. Now, from Jan to June, so much has happened that I already feel like I've already lived another year, but it's been just 6 months. Whether you talk about accomplishing my Goodreads reading challenges or moving to different places, experiencing different things, and learning a lot in one's life, these 6 months have been exclusively jam packed for me. As much as this may sound unbelievable to you guys, I have actually gone from reading 50 books a year, dropping down to just 10 or 4 books a year, and then coming back again to 70 to 100 books a year. And just looking at this year, I'm just so wonderstruck myself that I've completed 100 books in just 6 months period, and that is what gave me the idea to come across and share my views with you guys in today's video. So don't be too hard on yourself and get into the peer pressure of XYZ people are reading so many books a year and I'm just reading one or two or maybe 5 books a year. As long as you are reading even a single book one year, just don't stop reading. I think you are good to go. And that's just what I decided to do when I was back then experiencing a lot of different kind of lemons from life. And this year has been sparingly good, so I decided to dedicate all that time into my book reviewing journey, and that has paid off pretty well so far. So I've read 108 books this year so far, and here are basically my top favorites. There are top 10, and then there are also two honorable mentions which I just could not skip because they are way too good. On number 10, I have Confessions of a 40 something fuck up, which is basically a tale of a woman who is describing her life of what happens when you land on the wrong side of 40s. Basically, you make so many plans about your life of getting so many things accomplished and getting those tick boxes of marriage, children, job, career, settlement, and all those things that you actually want to achieve while you gain up to the age of 40, or you are basically in your 40s. And what will happen if you fail at either one or basically all of those things? And she is showcasing her point of view in all those aspects and how she's tackling those stigmas, the boxes that she couldn't tick, and what you can learn from it. On number 9, I have God Killer, which is a fantasy book that showcases a LGBT trope in its main protagonist, and they are actually licensed god killers by the Empire, who basically wants all the other gods dead because they don't want them to rise to the power and take over the world. And that is where she stumbles upon a girl who is somehow interconnected with a particular god, and their both lives are intertwined. And while she's at it at killing that particular god, she cannot because she is kind of falling for that girl. A quick disclaimer: this book ends on a cliffhanger, and I don't know when the next part will be out, so that's that. Number 8 brings us to The Storm Singers, which is another fantasy book with a very complicated world build up. It includes humans, gods, demons, shadow realm, light realm, beautiful earth, and magical mages who are trying to create different promises with one another and destructing the beautiful world that they're living in. Now, I must tell you that the overall plot of the story would be understood in gradual layers because it is kind of complicated. Best read in a combination of physical book plus audiobook because the narrator's voice, especially who is doing the demons part, is also very goosebummy. So I would recommend you to try this. And number 7, we have All the Dead Lie Down, which comes with a goofy horror, fantasy, and magic kind of a vibe. The story here is about the Lovelace house and people residing in it. Now, there is a main protagonist who has nothing better to do because she has lost almost everything in life, and then she discovers this nanny job at Lovelace house, and there are peculiar children living around, and she gets a goofy kind of a vibe, but she really wants to do it, so she gets the job and starts doing it. But the level of threats start to increase. There are random incidents that are happening in this house that are getting threatening to her life, and especially with the return of her eldest daughter in the house, she's seeing a lot of goofy things messing up her life, and she is now deciding whether to stay or to just run away. On number six, we have The Luminaries, which is a fantasy book with a beautiful world build up and amazing creatures that will just blow your mind. The story here is about a girl living in the outskirts of a town which you cannot find on map. You cannot use your cell phones here because they don't officially work, and this town is surrounded by a magical forest filled with nightmares who are creatures of the night. And there is this order of luminaries who basically look after the whole town and protect them from the nightmares by hunting them. And now our main protagonist wants to join the order of the luminaries, and there are certain level of tasks and exams that she need to pass before she actually can join the order. On number five, we have A Study in Drowning, which can be considered a modern classic too. It's just released, and I already feel this book has very classical vibes. It has the tropes of dark academia, a fairy king who comes into your dreams and is able to harm you in real life, and also a study behind a very famous literature work and the mystery behind its original authorship. This book is particularly for the fans of literature plus fantasy trope, and if that marries well with you, I think you should try it. Number four, I have Immorality, which is a memoir and a non-fiction book, and this is the story of a very young teenage girl who was actually suffering from a borderline personality disorder. And had things been different from an awareness perspective, maybe her family knew about it or people nearby actually knew about it, her life could have been a very different one from the one she actually had. And the challenges she faced, she takes you through the whole journey. And I think this is a must read for people who are actually dealing with young teenagers and are not able to understand their behavior. I'm not necessarily saying each and everyone who would have this, but it's always better to be aware than to be sorry later. Number three, we have The Burning God, which is the third book in the Poppy War series, and the disclaimers for this book would be that it would be a spoiler for the other two books, so make sure you read the other two books. I wouldn't be hence giving you a plot story here, just to keep things clean and spoiler free. But this book has been the saddest of all, and it did unravel me in the most uncertain ways. It has its own way of getting onto your nerves. The characters in this book, the whole structure and the writing statements and everything actually will get to you and will make you cry and get your heads in your hands, and you'll be like, what the hell is happening in this book? So if you are a fantasy lover, please just read it. Talking about another book that broke my heart, on number two, we have The Scarlet Veil, which is the story of one of the supporting characters in the Serpent and Dove series, Cecily, and she meets a vampire named Mihal, and it's their romantasy story basically, but it's so powerful and intriguing. The whole story and the plot picks up right from where Gods and Monsters end, so you might want to read that series before getting into this book. And it's a chunky piece, so you might want to be aware about that, but this book is so amazing and it ends on a cliffhanger, so just be aware. And on number one, we have All That Consumes Us, which is a dark academia book revolving around a female protagonist who basically wants to be a writer but is struggling to find her spot into this elite society of Magnivery. And finally, when she gets through there, everything is lustring gold except the faces of these students who look like they have been drained of everything in them. Now, each one of these students is a special person in their own category. They follow different artistic ventures. They could be writers, singers, music composers, etc. But they all have their special talents. But they are so consumed by their own work that they just can't stop doing it. Though initially everything seems to fall in its place, she later feels that this is not the work of a normal human being, but the work of some ghostly spirits. Now, I also wanted to give honorable mentions to The Sunset Years of Agnes Sharp and The Tales of the Forgotten Founders, which are two very special books that I read this year. The Sunset Years of Agnes Sharp is around the story of murder mystery that is occurring in the society of where majorly old age people are living, and how they are basically living it and yet solving these mysteries, the story around it. The Tales of the Forgotten Founders is actually a finale book in one of my favorite Fallenheim Chronicle series, which I was so excited to read, and both of them did really well from plot and writing and storyline perspective. So I was really happy to read them as well. Now, it's really difficult to predict how the next half of the year would go, especially for me. What kind of time experiment would I be able to share upon my books and how much love would I be able to give them. So I'm kind of sorted and feel a bit settled from numbers perspective of reaching my goal. And now I would be basically focusing only on the books that I actually want to read just for entertainment perspective, and hopefully they would be good, because up until now I was doing a lot of experimentation that leads to certain disappointments as well, and I really want my second half not to be so fingers crossed for that. And that, my friends, would be all the things that I wanted to share with you guys. I hope you had a good time watching this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read even a single book this year. I would love to know their names. And hopefully I'll catch up with you in my next video. Until then, keep your coffee strong and your TBRs long. Goodbye.